viewers and learners of the Postgraduate Diploma in Environmental and Occupational Health. Today we will deal with the course MEVE 002, that is Healthcare. In this session, we will discuss about stress at the workplace. I introduce myself as Dr. Sushmita Bhaskar, working in the School of Interdisciplinary and Transdisciplinary Studies, Indira Gandhi National Open University. So after listening to this session, you will be understanding the terms stress and how stress affects our health at the workplace. Now most of us are having stress factors, it may be due to our busy schedule, due to the work performance, due to certain other problems like with the peers or with the financial commitments or various other kinds of problems. And also there is a lot of competition in your work environment. So there is motivation, there is encouragement to do so many things, and you also are ambitious in the process, but ultimately sometimes if you are not able to cope up with all that workload, then it does affect our health at some point, and then we get something known as stress. So let us now understand the term stress and how the stress can even give rise to certain diseases, for example heart diseases or coronary diseases, and in the same way diabetes and so on. So stress is not easily quantifiable, and the resulting long-term effects of stress, this can include depression, high blood pressure, then you can have myocardial infarction, diabetes mellitus, that is high blood sugar, and these are very difficult to accurately relate to stress, as these are conditions that can arise from a number of other causative factors. Because sometimes it is not the stress alone that is giving to these problems. We may have genetic predisposition and our lifestyle factors, and the lifestyle factors includes the diet which we are consuming, the exercise factor. So all of us should make it a point that we do exercise at least for half an hour in the morning or in the evening. In the same way, social and family circumstances, these could also be some factors for the stress. So therefore stress can be related to all this, and you can have a various amount of the health effects. But still, stress does form an important link in the causation of large number of diseases. Now there has been scientific reports, and scientific knowledge about stress is important because it not only affects all of us, and it is responsible for significant morbidity, mortality and economic loss. But also we can do a lot in order to reduce the stress at work and also in the domestic life. Now some examples, if we can relate to some examples and then understand this problem, then that would be better. So suppose you are visiting a remote place and you are walking on a street during the night time. All of a sudden there is a wild dog that comes to attack you. So what would be your response? The first, you will be frightful, you would be scared of the dog. Then you will also tend to run away from that situation. So therefore you are frightened, but then sometimes you are also ready to fight. So this automated physiological response is known as the flight and the fight reaction. This spontaneous response, it can result from the stimulation of the sympathetic nervous system, and this can secrete certain hormones called as the adrenaline and the noradrenaline directly into our blood. These hormones are related to the stress, and they are also known as the stress hormones. The action of these hormones result into faster beating of the heart, increased supply of blood in the muscle and conversion of glycogen to glucose in the muscles. So you have seen in that situation, the example that we just gave now, you will see that your heartbeat actually increases and that beats faster. So all these are due to the hormones that are being produced, and it is a stress indication. The end result of all this, it is greater availability of energy which is necessary to combat this emergency situation. This process of responding to the emergency situation, this is referred to as stress, and the situation is called a stressor. According to the word stress, this refers to a process in the body, to the body's general plan for adapting to all the influences, changes, demands and strains to which it might be exposed. The stress reaction, this has played a very important role in our evolution. So from the Stone Age ancestor time, that they were always under a threat from the, for example, the predators, or they had the big creatures. So they were always under some kind of a stress and attack from these organisms. So these Stone Age men, they needed an efficient physiological mechanism to fight out the day-to-day threat for his survival. So this stress mechanism has played an important role in preventing the extinction of the human race itself. In the absence of this stress, the human species would have almost become extinct. Therefore, moderate stress reaction is important for meeting the individual goals in the modern society. Stress for a prolonged period, that can result into a number of ailments, and that can affect almost all the organs of our body. Now, stressors at the workplace. We can divide this or classify this into two types. One is the positive or the eustress, and the second is the negative or the distress. Positive stressors, okay, this is less heard, but we should know what this means. So these are those which have motivating influences on the employees. For example, being employed in an organization, that has lot of benefits because it keeps you busy on your toes and you have a lot of challenges that gives you the means to develop yourself. And sometimes when you are given a very high position or a leadership position, then that gives you a sense of pride, identity and personal achievement. And then it also allows you to socialize, build contacts, collaborate with people and find support. And this also provides you with money to support yourself and also your family. So therefore, these are positive stressors. Now, some of the incentives which are included in these positive stressors, they include certain financial benefits and awards, for example, promotion or even national awards from certain agencies. So this is the most important stressor for short-term performance. Optimal physical environment, including maintenance of the ambient temperature, working in a 25 degrees centigrade or in a proper air-conditioned office when the heat stress is too much. They also including the humidity, the absence of occupational hazards like noise, heat, vibration, because some of us like to work in very quiet and noise-free environments where we are able to focus on writing books or book chapters or even research papers. So these two play an important role in stress and stress management. In the same way, vibration, dust, chemicals and fumes. Then the problem of the solving opportunity, optimum workload, a well-defined role in the workplace and also job security. So those were all something related to the positive stress. Negative stressors. Now the negative stressors essentially consist of the absence of these positive stressors. This can include the inadequate financial package and the lack of developmental opportunity, workload beyond the capacity of the worker. Then the monotony of the work, such as working on an assembly line or like everyday work, you find it to be monotonous and not very enterprising. Physical and chemical hazards that we are exposed to. This could include the extreme heat, the cold, the humidity, the noise, the vibration, dust, fumes, etc. All of these in your work environments. Then we can also have the physiological and psychological stressors, such as the role of ambiguity and the role conflict, lack of job security, shift work, particularly those who are working in the night shift. Then there is racial and religious discrimination at the workplace sometimes. There can be sexual harassment, bullying, and there can also be the lack of opportunity for problem solving. So all these come under the negative stressors, and then it does lead to distress. The effects of stress. So the net effects of stress are determined by the intensity of the stress and the coping ability of the individual. The coping ability varies from individuals to individuals and in the same individual also from time to time. So depending on the potentiality, the positive or the harmful outcome, the stress is often classified into the positive stress, which we just discussed, and that is also referred to as eustress, and the negative stress, which can also be referred to as distress. Eustress and its positive effects. So we have discussed some of the workplace and the positive eustress or the positive effects of this. But then the effects of the stress at the workplace, this can be largely determined by the gap between the job demand and the individual ability to meet these demands. The eustress always occurs by the presence of motivation, by hope. They are very important factors. So for example, let us discuss this with an example. You are asked to finish a job within 2 days instead of a week, and normally you will take some time in order to complete this job. You are also offered a handsome incentive in order to complete this job in that 2-day period or a stipulated time. So here if we take into account the deadline, that is those 2 days or the 48 hours, that becomes your negative stressor, and the financial offer which is positive, and this is a motivating factor, and that acts as a eustressor. Eustress, this can also help to enter a state of flow, a heightened sense of awareness and complete absorption into an activity. Low level stress, this increases attention and interest at the workplace, and it will result into better performance. However, stress levels beyond the coping capacity of the worker, that can cause anxiety, and it can also result into impaired performance. In addition to this increased performance at the workplace, the low level stress, that can also result into the following long-term benefits. So when we take up less stress, or when we are less stressed, then definitely the brain power will be boosted, and we can also be able to perform in a better fashion. Boosting the brain power. Low level stressors, this can stimulate the production of chemicals in the brain which are essential for the survival and growth of the cells. Hence, these are also called as the neurotrophins. In fact, this may be the primary mechanism by which the exercise, a physical stressor, can also help boost productivity and also concentration. Strengthening your immune response. So the body prepares itself for the possibility of any injury by producing the extra interleukins. These are nothing but chemicals that help regulate the immune system, and they defend against certain microorganisms, and they can provide at least a temporary defensive boost. Increased resilience. It is well known with infections that are exposed to low level infections that increase the body resistance against more severe infections in the future. And this is said to be true for the stress also. Repeated exposure to the stressful events at a low level, that can make one person easier to manage these more stressful conditions even in the future periods. One example is a study that was conducted by the University of California, San Francisco, and they observed that while chronic stress promotes the oxidative damage to our DNA and RNA, moderate levels of the perceived daily stress, they actually seem to protect against it and enhance psychobiological resilience. Distress and its harmful effects. So this, the beneficial and the harmful effects of stress, they can be compared with taking salt in our meal. So you've all seen that when the right amount of salt is added in your food preparation, then the food is tastier, it is palatable, and you also enjoy your food. But in higher quantity, even one day also, or at one time of the meal also, if you find that the salt level is high, then it will ultimately spoil the taste, and also it can produce certain harmful effects. It may even increase the blood sugar level. So therefore, distress is something like this. It could be compared to this example of the salt which I gave. So this is an aversive state in which a person is unable to completely adapt to stressors and their resulting stress, and they show maladaptive behaviors. The clinical manifestations of distress, they can be classified into acute manifestations and the chronic manifestations. Acute manifestations. Here, the person suffering acute distress, they almost every day they experience uneasiness, they have worry, they feel depressed, they also sometimes feel to shout, they are not able to perform better, they feel unhappy, they are unable to sleep, and they cannot concentrate on their work, and also it leads to the loss of appetite and increased acidity and other gastrointestinal problems. So he is excited, alert, energetic, and ready to take up the quarrel also with his colleagues. Chronic manifestations. Repeated exposure to the acute distress levels. This can result into chronic manifestations such as anxiety and also panic attacks. Okay, you would have seen this also with certain people in your offices. Then they can have irritability, they can have depression, eating disturbances, and also the loss of sex drive. So decreased immunological response exposes to the vulnerability to infectious diseases and also certain types of cancers. Hans Selye's discovery of a direct relationship between the chronic stress and the excessive wear and tear throughout the body. This laid the foundation for a clear understanding of how extensive body damage can be done by repeated uncontrolled stressors. A number of diseases such as behavioral disorders, heart disease, asthma, diabetes, and even cancer, they have been suspected to be the result of the chronic stress. But still, it is difficult to establish the clear-cut relationship between these disorders and stress at the workplace or even elsewhere. The causative mechanism of most of the chronic diseases, This is quite complex and it can result from the interaction of a number of causative and contributing factors such as heredity, the lifestyle, which also includes the diet that you consume, the exercise, also smoking and alcoholism, because all these are actually interrelated. Like when you are depressed and when you are having a psychological stress, and then in that case you tend to smoke, you tend to take to alcohol, and then repeated alcohol intake, that can also lead to a different type of a lifestyle and it can have certain health havocs. And the same way your socio-economic status, this also plays an important role and a factor in the causative mechanism of most of these chronic diseases and in the stress levels. For example, the coronary heart disease, when the blood cholesterol level rises, then its deposition in the walls of the arteries, that can cause the narrowing or the blockage of the coronary blood vessels. A number of factors, the same way as we said, like alcohol, then the diet or the smoking, and also the heredity genetic problems, all this are frequently cited causes. Prolonged stress for a long time, because even your blood pressure, it doesn't come just after a week or after 10 days, but it is due to a prolonged stress that you have been exposed to. So this is known to result in increased release of the cortisols, which can result in higher cholesterol levels and also the high blood pressure. To cope with these stress, many of the individuals, they can take to smoking and also to alcoholism. So this complexity, it increases if one considers that the alcohol abuse is also multifactorial in origin. Among them, the literature survey, this refers to the prior incidents of depression, lack of family support and supportive environments even at your workplace, impulsiveness and also the stress. The acute stress itself, this can induce the contraction of the coronary arteries, and then that can again result in the reduction in the blood supply to the heart muscle. Depression, one of the most common mental disorders that is found in the general community and in the workplaces. This is referred to as depression. And depression is characterized by sadness, fatigue, a loss of interest in most of the activities, and also lack of energy and drive to perform your work. Other features such as insomnia or hypersomnia, loss or gain of the appetite, a tendency to blame oneself, and also suicidal tendencies, difficulty in concentrating, these are also present, and these are the serious forms of depression. My dear learners, in this session we have discussed about the positive stress, the negative stress, the effects of stress, and how the stress can also lead to certain types of diseases and long-term disorders. So long-term stress can result in certain heart ailments, your gastrointestinal upsets, and also depression, and then people take to various other things which are actually not good for your health. So diet, lifestyle, and a low level of stress, definitely that can still help you take on your work to a better levels, but high levels of stress is going to harm you. Therefore you should be able to perform your work only according to your capability. You should take up the work. So every person has a different energy level, and every person's family and socio-economic conditions are different. Therefore it is up to us as to how to organize our work during the day, during the week. So for example, if you are into teaching profession, or if you are a researcher, then you need to plan your activities as to in this week how much of laboratory experiments, how many hours am I going to devote. If I am only going to work on the X-ray diffraction, or I am only going to work on the geochemical characterization of certain elements, or if I am only going to do certain microbiological parameters. There again you need to make a timetable for yourself. You need to execute your plan accordingly. Is it for 4 hours? Is it for 6 hours? Here again you can have breaks in between. Plan one reaction for 1 hour, for 2 hours, take a break of 1 hour, then again plan another 1 hour, and then go home, take rest, read, come prepared for the next day. In the same way for your teaching activities. So only then, otherwise continuously when a teacher is exposed to too much of stress, then again the performance is seen in how he is able to deliver the same with his students, how he is able to explain the different concepts well to the students. So these are some examples that I have given, and in various professions, for example in the medical profession, doctors, they are exposed to day and night shift, and they have different levels of the stress, because they are always concerned about the health of their patients. Also when some of the doctors, they perform the long term operations, which could be, it could even be for 6 or even 7 hours or even more. So in that case, they really have to plan and prepare themselves and keep themselves free of work for before the surgery maybe, and even after that, so that their energy levels are not depleted and they are able to perform and do better, and they do not take up too much of stress which is going to affect their health ultimately. So my dear learners, I hope you have had a good understanding of this subject. Thank you for your patient listening.